The Fulcrum by Max Harms.
Strap in, everyone. We're nearing the Fulcrum and about to leave 0G.
The pilot's voice came through the cabin speaker like a clipped wire. Marek, decidedly not a real astronaut, scrambled for the nearest couch and scrabbled at the 4-point harness, missing the latch on the first try. His fingertips found it. He pulled the straps tight, then tighter. It had taken weeks to adjust to weightlessness. The prospect of suddenly being deep in a gravity well again made his stomach tighten, and it wasn't just any gravity well, it was the Fulcrum. Across the narrow tube of the mid-cabin, Dr. Halsey watched him with patient amusement. Guided by a professional precognition, she had already strapped in, well before the pilot's announcement. She looked at home on the crash couch, ankles crossed, a foil bag of dried fruit slowly drifting on a tether at her elbow. There were no windows on the Blue Shift. They were a cargo hauler, mostly, pulling goods out to join the ships already on their way to other worlds. They were basically a sterile tin can, from Marek's perspective.
First time in the slingshot?
Asked the astronaut, her golden hair pulled back in a tight braid.
First everything.
He tried to laugh off the nerves. Halsey's smile widened a fraction.
You're in for a shock.
The cabin lights pulsed amber. The pilot, Ramos, spoke again.
60 seconds to chemical ignition, inertial velocity 42,000 kilometers per second and climbing. Fulcrum periapsis is 3.5 million clicks, falling fast.
Marek's mouth felt like it had been freeze-dried. He tried to swallow.
42,000 kilometers per second.
He muttered under his breath. He'd been chosen to fly with the crew of the Blue Shift because of his follower count and his world-famous brand of techno-enthusiasm. His team had almost a dozen full-time scientists. Marek himself had been in engineering before he'd dropped out of school to be internet famous. Fat lot of good any of that did. He might as well have been a bucket of meat. He focused. He was here to tell the story. He needed a narrative. He tried to visualize it. The USA was about 4,500 kilometers across. So like a tenth of a second. Jesus. Dr. Halsey, still watching him with that kind of insane coolness that all astronauts seemed like they were born with, said,
Ship, what's the maximum transverse acceleration the human body can survive?
The Blue Shift's feminine AI answered in a polite British accent.
That depends on duration. Sustained tolerance over more than a few seconds is approximately 12 gravities when oriented eyeballs in and 8 for eyeballs out, with significant individual variation. A peak of 1 second at 50 gravities is survivable, though loss of consciousness and hemorrhaging are common. To calculate the upper limit, one must...
The pilot cut in.
Approaching the Fulcrum, all hands report secure.
The spider silk weave of Marek's undersuit wicked away his sweat from under his armpits. It did nothing for his palms or his forehead. Halsey touched her comm and said,
Secure.
As she fished a raisin out of her bag and rolled it absently between her fingers.
Secure,
answered Marek, fumbling with his own device. He'd been fine when he met the president. A moment later, the pilot cut in with
30 seconds to burn.
He knew they were doing an Oberth maneuver, a strategic burn right as the Blue Shift got close enough to the Fulcrum to get boosted out of the gravity by stealing a tiny fraction of the Fulcrum's momentum. Marek closed his eyes and focused on the math. The slingshot maneuver meant doing something like going around the celestial equivalent of a hairpin turn. If they were coming in at 42,000 kilometers per second, and then they were going to boost out even faster. They'd need to accelerate by 84,000 kilometers per second in a total of, 7 minutes? Was he remembering that right? He couldn't be.
10 seconds.
The number burned in his brain. 7 minutes was a little less than 500 seconds. Even if the geometry somehow rounded the needed acceleration down to a mere 5,000, that was over 10 kilometers per second squared. 1 g was about 10 meters per second. They'd feel over 1,000 g over several minutes.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
The impulse from the rockets kicked in with a roar, and he pressed into the couch with enough force to make it feel like he was lying on his back and being squeezed. Any second now they'd start feeling the gravity from the Fulcrum yank them around. From what he'd read, it was supposed to be thousands of times more massive than the Sun, even if his calculation was several orders of magnitude off.
We're going to...
The words splatter like a tomato on the windshield bubbled up in his mind, but he refused to say it. It was an understatement. An alternative came. Pancake. They were going to pancake. They were going to crepe. More than crepe, puree. Or maybe they'd just spaghettify from the black hole. Why the hell was it always food?
We're almost at periapsis,
Said the pilot.
67,000 kilometers to the event horizon. Don't look down, folks. It's a long drop.
He realized he could feel it pulling him. The rockets pressed him back, but the tidal forces were pulling on his feet and legs. It was fine. It almost felt like he was on a medium-thrill roller coaster, going perfectly straight. He looked towards Dr. Halsey. She had unclipped the foil bag of dried fruit and was flicking raisins gently into the air, watching them rise in gentle parabolas before she caught them easily in her mouth. She eventually noticed his boggling.
How's it feel?
She asked.
To be a little younger than you would have been, I mean.
He stared at her.
What?
From the gravity, can you feel your clock slowing down?
He knew she was teasing him.
We'll know to the millisecond when telemetry catches up. My bet is about 15 seconds total, not counting anything from our speed.
We're...
He looked down at his own body, at the harness, at his hands.
We're not dead.
No,
She agreed, with that same detached coolness.
just a little faster. Well, a lot faster, actually. At least from the Earth's perspective.
How? Why? We've got to be accelerating at...
He couldn't bring himself to say something so absurd, so he lowered the number until it was plausible.
Accelerating at over 10 Gs.
She caught a raisin between her teeth and made a confused face.
From the rocket?
No, from the...
He stopped. The burn was pulling him backwards. The Fulcrum's tidal effect was pulling his feet more than his head, giving something of a feeling of being pulled down. But he knew that almost all of their acceleration was coming from...
Oh,
he said.
derp.
She smiled at him.
We've been accelerating for days, falling towards the singularity.
Halsey confirmed.
Slowly at first, now at over half the speed of light. We'll slow down as we pull away, but the net effect is speeding up. Most of the delta V is from the Fulcrum's speed, actually, rather than our little rockets. The peak acceleration is something like 25 million Gs. But regardless of how fast you're going or how much the gravity pulls, free fall is always weightless. At this distance from the center, almost all of the Fulcrum's influence is pulling on every atom in your body with the same force. You can feel compression and tension, but not gravity. Weight only comes from the floor pushing up.
He sat with that for a long moment, part of him wanting to bury his embarrassment. Halsey seemed content to leave him to his thoughts. Eventually the pilot cut in, announcing,
60 seconds to end of burn.
Marek shook his head and looked back to his traveling companion, who was still playing with her food. He cleared his throat.
And the time dilation thing is because it's a black hole? Like an interstellar?
She looked at him and shook her head.
Black holes aren't special. The Fulcrum might as well be a very, very heavy planet. Time dilation comes from gravity.
He could feel the tugging on his legs getting weaker as they gradually pulled away on their way towards the fleet.
People on Earth experience it too.
Continued Halsey.
For every 100 years that pass from the perspective of someone floating in interstellar space, folks on Earth experience 50 fewer seconds, mostly from the distortion from the sun.
Marek knew exactly what his next video was going to be about.
Don't feel bad about it. I honestly don't really get general relativity either,
Said the doctor, catching another raisin with her teeth. She offered him the bag. The engines switched off right as he took it. His arm, released from the thrust, flew forward, catapulting dried fruit into the cabin, once again in zero gravity.